Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Live with Breathe America. As you can see, my guest today is a picture of a dumpster fire. Um, so we brought Bethany back to have a discussion today about some events that we saw the other day, or that she saw the other day, and that she shared with us. So, um, basically, what we're going to be talking about is several different protests, but an incident that Bethany was able to catch on film that we'll be sharing with you guys, as well as um, our particular thoughts on why this is happening in such a small town this time. Because this wasn't in Portland, this wasn't in um, a major city. This was actually in a small town. So that's one of the angles we're going to talk about. One of the things that we're interested in digging into. So, Bethany, how have you been?
I'm as good as I can be. I keep finding myself in these situations.
Well, you do tend to go there on purpose, right?
That's true. As you guys know, I am a freelance journalist. I cover politics, the protests, and I always find myself in these situations that I try to document and report on the best of my ability.
Gotcha. So let's just jump right into it. What got you well, how this whole situation started? Go ahead and paint a picture for everybody on where you were, what was going on, and what the premise of the rally or protest or whatever you want, or however you want to describe it.
Sure. So, as you guys know, 2 weeks ago, I was in Portland for the Proud Boy rally. And then last Saturday, I was in Bend going to a rally that looked like it could escalate. About a day or two prior to Saturday, there's this group called the Peacekeepers. They went ahead and planned a rally that was protesting the Proud Boys. After Donald Trump's speech and the debate and stuff saying, stand back and stand by, a lot of people in the community decided to do a protest against that group. And of course, things ended up not resulting peacefully. The date was not disclosed to the public until that morning, but the location ended up being Pilot Butte Park, which is on the base of a butte in the middle of Bend, Oregon. So I showed up a little bit before noon. At that point, it was not the protest against the Proud Boys, but they renamed it to a block party, protesting white supremacy, which I think is what they called it. So I showed up, just kind of hung out, and I ended up getting a call from a source of mine that said the Trump supporters, or alleged Proud Boys at the time, were on their way to the same location, that they had changed their location because they were supposed to have a rally that day as well, to Pilot Butte Park. So you have two sides that are already opposed to each other coming to the exact same place for their rallies. Definitely a scary thing, especially for me. The week before getting assaulted at the rally, I was a little weary of what could happen. On the BLM side, things were pretty interesting. They had a lot of music, a lot of people showed up, a lot of support for Black Lives Matter, a lot of different people of color there. And then the Trump supporters showed up, and immediately there was an altercation. So a guy with a flag came in with, I believe, his wife and his friend, and then the peacekeepers, who claim to be a protective group of the BLM movement, they quickly counteracted and tried to get the guy to leave. Things ended up resulting in yelling and some screaming. And eventually, after a good 30 minutes or so, things seemed to dissipate. More Trump supporters showed up, and so there was one side of the park, which was the BLM rally. There was a street in between, and then there was the Trump supporters kind of in the middle of the parking lot in this grass area. So only a street divided them. More Trump supporters started to show up, more BLM supporters started to show up, and both were kind of doing their things. So half the day I was over on the Trump supporter side, talking to them, taking their pictures, kind of seeing like what's their view is and why are they there. And then same with the BLM, you know, what their view is, why are they there, and why are each parties doing their things. I had most of the day was honestly pretty peaceful. It was actually important for me where if I did one thing at one group, I had to do one thing at the other. So I had like a slice of pizza at the BLM party, and then I had like a Pepsi at the Trump supporter rally, just so I could even out my opinions. That was pretty fun. But everything was fine, and both groups were happy. And throughout the day, there was multiple interactions that got very close to violence or very close to eruption, but all of them dissipated. And so they'd get really close to something happening, and then both sides would kind of just go back to their side of the street. And nothing really happened until both sides started to leave. So the BLM rally around, I'd say about 5:30 or so, things started to close down. So they started to leave, and then the Trump supporters started to leave as well. People started saying that there was Proud Boys over at the Trump supporter rally. I can't confirm that because I did not see, of course, the golden reefs. I did ask some people, hey, do you guys identify as Proud Boys? They said no. So I just call them Trump supporters because I don't want to lump people into things that I cannot confirm. The Trump supporters started to leave, especially, and of course, a lot of trucks heading to the second drive around bend where they were going to do just driving around the streets with a whole bunch of other people. And I was actually starting to leave. So I started to leave the rally, and next thing I know, a big crowd started to form. So I run over to this crowd as fast as I can. And we have a video.
I got it. Is this the time to go ahead and just play the video?
This is the time to play the video. And like I said, throughout the day, it was pretty peaceful. Things got really close. And this is when things erupted.
So I'm just going to tell everybody the video is about a minute and a half long. So just go ahead and take that in, and then we'll get back to talking about the things that we saw or the things that you'll see here in these things. Oh, we got to get the audio on. Start it again. We're going to start that again with the audio, guys. It's important that we hear the audio. There's some things there. Yeah, the audio is important. And yeah, there's some cursing and swearing. So if that's not your thing, I apologize in advance. But the reason for the audio, you'll know here in a second.
You'll quickly figure that out.
Very unique sound, isn't it?
They're not going to find it funny when they find out what it is.
Still a unique sound.
It is.
What the fuck? Hey! What the fuck? Hey! Whoa, 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 whoa! Hey! What the You fucking piece of shit! Fuck you! Hey! I'm putting 357 now. You put the pepper on me, you're gonna fucking get a hole in it. Copy that? Keep the pepper in the fucking pot. I will pull my weapon if you don't pull yours. We're gonna pull ours out.
I got some. Get your hand on your gun. I'm fine. Can I open it now?
So, yeah, that's a lot to take in. the sound that we were talking about is obviously a taser. Somebody was rattling off a taser. That's what that ticking, rapid ticking sound that you guys were hearing was. And obviously there was people there that was armed. A lot of pepper spray and bear spray, it looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good situation.
No, and I was pretty surprised just because both groups were leaving. So supposedly that's the beginning of the video. I didn't get what started it. Rumor is a flag was stolen. I can't confirm that. But apparently that's how some people think it started. I showed up, immediately turned my GoPro on. You hear tasers. Obviously, you see fists being thrown. At one point, a guy's body slammed in the background. I don't know if anyone caught that. There's bear mace, and then there's pepper spray. And you can hear me in the video, and I'm coughing pretty hard. I inhaled a lot of it. And then I was trying to get that shot of that woman who, is crying, and they're trying to pour water in her face because she got in her eyes. And I just hear gun. And for me, my body was like, no, you need to drop to the ground. You need to put your hands up. And then I guess my journalism took over, and I actually ran towards it. And there is photos. I don't have the photos with me. I'll try to email Patrick them. But there is photo of the man pointing his gun with his finger on the trigger. Obviously poor trigger safety. There is argument of stand your ground laws, but he did not stand his ground. He chased, which then that's not a part of his protection there. What happened after that? Some people threw up because of so much of that gas. I almost did, because it just goes in your lungs, and that's it. And then I just went around and tried to get as much as I could, as much after photos. People were pretty coded, and people were scared. People were crying, and one thing that got me was at one point throughout the day, there was someone on the right, and they had like 2 kids that were all dressed up and like blue flag stuff. And so I talked to the parents, and I talked to the kids, and I ended up photographing them earlier in the day. And when I was photographing this dude who was dripping just bear spray and pepper spray, this woman came up to me, and she's like, please come here. As a journalist, I just need you. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, the gas got in my car, and my kids were in my car. And she wanted me to do an interview with the kids. And you can find that on my Twitter. But talking to the 2 kids that are maybe 8, one of them, I think the girl's 8, the boy's probably 4 or 5, and just them, saying we were choking. And this little girl being like, the gas came in the car, and I started choking. And apparently the little boy had used his inhaler. And that's the side effects of when these things happen. Is it's not just the people who engage in the fight, but there were children on both sides, and children got affected by this.
And I got to think that these are the kind of situations that if you take your child with you to, and something violent does end up happening like this is something they're going to remember. This isn't the kind of thing that they just forget about one day. It's interesting. One of the comments in the thread right now is somebody's asking you, what do you feel in those moments? Like specifically, what do you feel? Like, what's it like for you in that moment?
I try my best to disassociate, because my feelings can get me hurt in these situations, and I have been hurt, where I'm terrified, to be honest. But I can't be terrified. I can't be scared when I'm out there, because I have a job to do. So, my lungs are filled with the same gas everyone else's lungs are filled with at that same time. And I want to throw up, because it really hurts. Bear spray and pepper spray hurts. And you're scared and you just kind of want to have feeling and you want to react, but you can't because I have a job to do. So I try to put all of my feelings aside to deal with later and just do what I have to do. And that's why I think I was able to run towards the gun. Is my feeling at that moment is, oh my God, someone has a gun. This could be it for me. You know, if I run towards this situation, this could be it. And I have to put those feelings aside and run towards it anyway. And I have to put those feelings aside of even last, when I was up in Portland, that was really scary. I was assaulted and that's really scary. And I don't really feel comfortable in these situations because I've been hurt before and I could easily be hurt again, but I have to put that fear aside to do my job. And it's a very hard thing to do. And it has side effects and it has tolls to it. But you can't feel in those moments. You have something to do. You can feel later.
It's a really interesting thing, all of this build up. And, one of the things we're talking about tonight is guys, this happened in Bend, Oregon. The population in Bend, Oregon's a little over 100,000, like 105,000 and change, correct?
Yeah. 105,000
so this
and
isn't
change.
a major city. This isn't a major city, you guys. This is a much, much smaller town in the middle of nowhere. I've driven through it a few times. It's out there ways. This isn't a Portland event. We have incidences that are now happening in Kenosha, small towns or smaller towns. We have, or smaller cities, I should say. We have it in Bend, Oregon. We have it all over the place. And, I was having a discussion just the other day with Mike, and I said, this is the escalation with this. It's coming to a city near you guys. Like that's the reality of the situation right now. The more it gets normalized in the media, I think the more we're going to see this escalate place to place to place to place. And as you guys could see in the video, I think it's, all day they managed to, it got heated at times, but then they'd back off and it never really turned to violence. But in the end, as everybody's leaving, it breaks into that. And as you can see, like those guys, they're throwing punches to hurt people. They're not fooling around. The taser came out real quick. Like so did the pepper spray, so did the mace. And within under a minute, somebody's yelling gun. That's how quickly something like this escalates, even in small town America. So if this is what's going to start happening all over the place, what do we do next? How do we handle these situations as we move forward? Number one, I think the number one thing I want to say is this. First and foremost, if you want to participate in a protest or a rally, that is your right to do so. I encourage you to do it. Don't take your children. These things can spin out of control way too fast. You are not in control of large groups of people. So don't take the children, don't belong there. That is so, as a parent, that is something that just strikes me as inappropriate. I understand what it is to be a single parent and want to go do something, and you got your kids with you. It's easier now for me because my kids are older, but they weren't always older. And so I don't know. For me, I would advise everybody not to don't take your kids with you. That's not a good thing. But outside of that, and Jennifer, you threw up there, arm yourself, like the guy said, or like Bethany was saying about the guy that pulled his pistol. You put yourself in that position with a firearm and you end up being attacked and you pull that pistol in order to defend yourself. You're not at home. It's not a standing ground. I mean, you do still have the right to defend yourself. And I encourage you to do that. But as somebody who carries almost every single day, I wouldn't take a pistol to a protest for a reason. Number one, it makes you a target. Number two, everybody there's already, tense. It's already a tense situation. So, and you know, like Toby just said, you only pull a gun for one reason, just one. And it's not a threat. It's not something you show. If that gun comes out, it's coming out because you're going to use it, and your life is in danger. It's one thing if that happens and you're walking through a mall parking lot at a grocery store, you know, or something like that, you know, and you are put in a situation where you need to defend yourself. It's a whole nother thing when you go to a situation that you know is inherently has the potential to be violent, and then it ends up violent. Man, that's a gray area for me. I don't honestly, I don't know how I feel about it because I've never really thought about it. And because every time it came to taking a firearm with me to a protest, I just said no. Didn't make sense.
I don't carry. I don't arm myself. I don't really have anything to defend myself. Mostly because for me, I'm not showing up as a protester. I'm showing up as a journalist. So I'm not supposed to interfere. I'm not supposed to, like, if tear gas lands at my feet, I can't kick it. You know, I have these rules and these moral laws that I have to obey where I can't shape it in any way. So I have to show up unarmed. And if something were to happen, then, or if something would have happened to me, then something would have happened to me. And that's just something that I'm aware of. You know, when I was in Portland, there was nothing I could do. Not to mention, you know, no one can see me, but, you know, I'm small. I'm 5'1". I weigh about 115 pounds. I mean, I'm not going to win in these situations. I just have to do what I can do.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, you're anytime you go to one of these events, you know, you're putting yourself at risk, and yeah, you're there to record it. You're there to watch what happens, but you're, you know, going armed, it would be a difficult thing. So let me ask you this though. Why do you think this happened in Bend, Oregon, in a small town? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Bend has been gearing up like this for a while. I've been to a few different protests and rallies there. And as people know, I'm Oregon based, so I travel around Oregon. You know, I hit Prineville, I hit Bend, I hit Redmond, I've hit Portland. And I should be branching out to other states soon, but I'm usually just Oregon based. Bend has been having protests really since about May. Once George Floyd died, everything, not just Bend, you know, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but all these small towns started having protests where they hadn't ever seen a protest, or it was very rare. And Bend started having, I think at one point, like 3 or 4 protests a week. And quite a few hundred went, you know, and people were showing up and people were going. And there was one instance where there was a George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter protest I was at, and there were counter protesters. So we did have a counter protester, and, you know, there were some militiamen, and I had somebody go over there and talk to them first, and then I went over and talked to them. And, you know, they were fully armed. And I was like, hi, you know, hi, I'm Bethany. How are you doing? And their thoughts, their arguments were, we wanted to protect small businesses. But Bend's downtown isn't that big, and a lot of people don't want to hurt local. You know, that day I made the joke that if there was going to be anything burning, it would be like the Walmart south of town. Like, no one was going to hurt these local businesses, not the protesters, not the militias. But we started seeing quite a bit of protests in Bend the last few months. And this is the first that I know of that had gotten this bad or this violent. You know, before there was always that gassing of the trucks, and then you're spraying the protesters with all that exhaust. But this had been the first violent protest I had seen in Bend, Oregon.
Real quick, Jennifer, I would absolutely defend my home as well. There's no doubt about it. And Chris, Yeah, 100,000 is a small town compared to Portland. Portland's got millions of residents, and that's and typically what we're seeing across the nation right now is where the larger cities, the larger populations are, is where we've seen most of the violence and the rioting and things like that. But now it's kind of changing. Now there's this shift towards smaller towns, and that's kind of what we're getting to.
Yeah, Portland has a little over 2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben's pretty small. And I was telling you I wanted to mention this. So there's Pendleton, Oregon, which is a small town. Their population's a little under 17,000 people in 2018, according to the Census Bureau. So for them, they had a protest August 29th of 2020, and the Eastern Oregonian reported on this. And according to them, there was about 200 BLM marchers and supporters, and about 150 counter protesters. So yeah, Black Lives Matter, about 200 of them, and then Blue Lives Matter, or militias, far right, whatever it was that day, about 150 of them. And I'm going to quote them on their article. They said, "Throughout downtown Pendleton, men carrying assault rifles would sometimes appear to either stand in front of businesses or track protesters." So it wasn't just Bend. I mean, they're way smaller than Bend. And they're having protesters with such an even smaller population. And just for comparison here, we're seeing in about Oregon, Portland has about the same census data as Pendleton does and Bend. So I'm just going to go ahead and quote that. People that answered what their race was. Here's what we have. We have white alone. So that's European. You just answered white of non-Hispanic descent. 77.1% of people are considered white alone, while Black alone is 5.8%. And that was from 2018. So you already have Oregon with a very low minority population having these rallies in very small towns, which we had never seen before. We have never seen this.
It's interesting. I want to touch on Tammy's point here. I'm going to pull this up for you. Tammy says that I feel that there's been enough protests to prove that they're not for peaceful change. They're for the disruption of the system. How do you feel about that, Bethany?
I'm going to play a devil's advocate for that comment.
Okay.
Because there's two parts, I would argue. There's the argument I have made about why some of the protests could be considered failing. A lot of that has to do with, and we've talked about this in past podcasts when you've had me on, has been, you have this violence, you have destruction, you have looting. And when you're trying to show goodness, when you're trying to fight for, quote, the right thing, you're going to be grouped into stereotypes, into lumps. If one person decides to graffiti and messes it up for the other 99% that are just there to protest peacefully. And we've seen that shown in the news and the media. So yeah, I do think to a certain extent the protest can be considered failing because, like I said, there's no leader, there's no organized demands from what we know of. Or there needs to be more organized demands. There needs to be connections between all the protesters, not having it be self-led in every city. Now, on the other side of that I have to go ahead and point out that I've heard argued is things on fire get people's attention. When there is violence, when there is, and I'm not saying I condone it, but when there is violence, when there is graffiti, when there is a cost, people tend to listen. If everything was peaceful and the cops were letting you, and I'm going to quote, I think this is Robert Evans' quote, if the cops let you rally in the street, it's not a protest, it's a parade. So when there is damage done, people pay attention. And those are the things that make the headlines. So there is an argument that in order to make people pay attention, things have to come at a cost. Now, that's just an argument I've heard.
Well, I think Tammy makes an interesting point. Because after you see enough protest that turn violent again and again and again, there is obviously, I think she's right about the fact that there is obviously a group of people involved in the protesting in all these different cities who are for the disruption of the system. They're not for peaceful change at all. Because if they were for peaceful change, they wouldn't be rioting and looting, or starting things on fire. Now, I get your point. And that is a valid point, but at the same time, statistically speaking, and there are plenty of studies that point this out, long-term peaceful protest or for legitimate change to society, peaceful protests actually will have a much better effect over the long run, and it's sustained change, whereas change that happens due to violence is short-lived. So whatever change that they're hoping to accomplish, which we don't even know really what that is at this point, outside of the generalized things that we know that the protest started for. But like you said, there's no real true universal list of demands that need to be met for them to all go home. And even if they were met, would they? I don't know that there's an answer there that anybody's going to really like, but it is an interesting point, and I'm all for your constitutional right to peacefully gather and protest and those kind of things. But at the same time, the destruction of property is not a protected right. And, telling the police to stand down and not do their job and allowing these things to escalate isn't helping the situation either. And we've seen a lot of these situations that have happened like that. But ultimately, I think what we're seeing now is in smaller communities, we're seeing an uptake in the same sort of behavior that we're seeing in the bigger communities. And that is concerning because there comes a point where you get to certain towns or certain communities that are a little bit smaller, where the residents of those communities aren't going to put up with it at all. They've been watching this on the news, and they're going to see a protest coming to their town, and they're going to take it as take it personal, and they're going to feel like they need to do something about it. And that's probably going to end badly. I
think with that, there's parts I agree and don't agree to a certain extent where we see these protests, and a lot of times a lot of them end up fine. Like I said, when it comes to like Bend, this was the first time I'd really seen anything that I could compare to Portland. Now there was an ICE rally in Bend where ICE came in and Oregon is a sanctuary state, so at one point they came in and grabbed some guys outside of their work with 2 ICE deportation buses ready. At the time, the federal agents claimed that there were warrants out for these guys' arrests. We found out later from DA Hummel, which has been Oregon's district attorney, that was not the case, actually. So there were no warrants out for these guys' arrests. Bend ended up showing up and surrounding these 2 deportation buses with a few hundred bodies. And I was on the ground that day for probably around 8 hours. So we had seen things escalate like this before. And really, ICE was the first time I had seen it look like Portland. Because what happened was everyone was surrounding the buses with their bodies. The feds ended up leaving for a little bit. It kind of turned into a hangout thing, trying to keep these men from being, put into a detention facility, I believe in Yakima, for undocumented immigrants that we've seen. And later that night, when people weren't letting the buses go, the feds moved in. And there were snipers on the roof. There was a K-9 unit in the back. There were ICE agents with live M4s 2 feet in front of me. And there were families and there were kids there. And once they moved in, and mind you, being under sniper eyes is something that you have to realize when you're there. That at any time, this could not end well. And they came in and gassed and pepper sprayed a lot of people. If you're on my Twitter, my background image is actually of a woman that was pepper sprayed, and some kids got hurt. and I had to protect an 8-year-old Hispanic girl that was there, because we didn't get the kids in time. And we talked about that earlier. So that was the first time Bend had looked like Portland. But this is the first time that we've seen counter protesters really collide like that, at least in Central Oregon.
I think what we have to do at this point is we have to start painting the picture that they're not as far apart as they think they are, and they're not each other's enemy. I looked at a story just the other day where one of the leaders in a local chapter of the Black Lives Matter movement was with or had ended up somehow, I don't remember exactly how it went, but it ended up having a conversation with a few Proud Boys, and they ended up calling a news conference to speak about it. And she's like, these aren't white supremacists. I mean, one of the Proud Boys she was talking to wasn't white, and she's like, he's not even white. How can he be a white supremacist? And she's and she described them as proud American men. That's what they are. And that the more that they communicate, the more that they talk, the more that they realized they're actually not that far apart from each other. They're actually they are working towards a lot of the same things. Now here's the interesting thing. Oh, this is the story right here. And the interesting thing is if leaders of the Proud Boys, a local Proud Boys chapter, and leaders of a local BLM chapter can come together and have a conversation and realize that they don't have to fight, that they're not enemies, I think that's the way forward. It's that open communication. It's being able to talk. It's being able to understand where each other, when you just show up at a rally, right? And you're with BLM, for example, and you see Trump, a Trump rally across the street or whatever you want to call it on the other side. And you immediately assume that they're there, that they're against you. Well, now tension's already high, right? So how do we get to a place where we can actually just look at each other and realize, like, we're not each other's enemies. Like, we're all Americans. We're all looking for the same thing. So, as we continue to talk about these subjects and things like that, I'm going to continue to point those things out every chance that I see them, like that story there, because it's so important. It's so important that we realize that we are not each other's enemies. We are all Americans here. And it gets missed so often. One of the things I saw earlier in the comments when we were showing the videos, like how do you tell who's who? And in that particular instant, I don't know, just I guess whoever's on the other side, that's it. Whoever's standing with you, standing in front of you isn't with you. It seems ridiculous, but that looks to be how it was going. But what are your thoughts on that story about that? Leader of the BLM and leader of the Proud Boys actually communicating and deciding that they're not against each other. And I mean, they spoke out directly against the media in that clip about not believing, what the media is telling them about telling each side about each other.
I will continue to say that both sides are more together than they probably realize. Both are exercising their constitutional rights. The BLM side is using their right to assemble, to rally for free speech, while the other side of the right, the Trump supporters, are using their amendment right to use arms. And both sides are going out there. For every protest, there's a counter protest. Well, both of you are protesting. Both of you are using your right to protest. Some sides, in Portland, I did see some of the BLM side armed. Not many, but one or two. And that's also an inherent right. Both sides, and I don't know how many times I can say this, but for the right, every time there's a Ruby Ridge or a Waco, there's a Breonna Taylor or George Floyd for the left. Both have experienced oppressive use of force by the federal government that has resulted in loss of lives. Both sides have experienced pain and suffering and death and sorrow, and both sides want change. Both sides want to be free. Both sides want to be heard. Both sides want this to end. But yet, instead of being together, instead of creating change that they see, they end up being so polarized, maybe due to the media, maybe due to years and years of just topics, and instead of realizing that we're all people and we're all humans, seeing each other as enemies, seeing each other as titles, the Proud Boys, Antifa, both sides being a face but dehumanizing the people. So somehow
I see in the comments there's been a couple of comments about holding the media accountable and holding career politicians accountable and things like that.
That's what I'm here.
I'm gonna say this, and who elected the politicians?
I believe that was us, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Who watches the news?
I think that's still us.
If we want change as a country, then maybe it's time we take responsibility for where we're at. Stop electing the same people over and over again, and stop watching the networks that we're all saying are misrepresenting the truth.
No, I agree. I totally agree with that. I think that, one of my biggest things, follow me, follow other indie journalists, follow the people who are there. Look at my videos, look at my statements. I try to keep my opinion out of it. I state the times, the dates, the locations, what happened. Follow independent journalists. Pay for news. It's really hard for us to support ourselves because what we do, we usually don't get paid for. Venmo us, know the journalists that you're talking to, know who you're voting for. I know in Oregon, we just got that voters pamphlet. Read it. They send it to you. Know who your sheriff is. Know who your governor is. Know who your DA is. Know who your elected officials are. You cannot keep complaining about it if you don't know who you voted for.
Well, here's the thing. Like I've been watching politics for a while, and I remember, I listened to, people talk about career politicians and how we need to do something and we need to get them out. We need to get them out. We're against career politicians, and I've listened to people and myself included, complain about the news media again and again and again about the way they report and all this kind of stuff. Yet I still see their articles. I haven't, I still look, so I'm actually part of the damn problem, and I didn't even realize it. Yeah, I'm speaking out against it, but like if I watch a news clip of theirs, even if it shows up on a Facebook feed, and that's traffic for them, right? And these news networks, they run on ratings. They run on ratings. If you don't like the media that we have, stop watching it. Watch independent journalists like Bethany is saying. Find a different source of your news. Stay away from the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Foxes, and all the major networks, and go with smaller stuff. Get a local paper, not national papers, or however you need to do it, right? And the same goes for politicians. 95% incumbent reelection rate. 95% incumbent reelection rate. Let that sink in for a second. How many years have you listened to everybody bitch and complain about politicians and career politicians, and yet they somehow have a 95% reelection rate? Maybe we should stop voting for those people and start voting for other people. Changing of the guard. The system is like there are things that we can do. We don't have to keep voting the same people in. We don't. But that requires people in every single state and every single district to make a decision to come together. This is why unity is so important. This is why we have to keep having these conversations, and we got to keep pointing this out, because ultimately everything about this government, everything about the setup of this government is designed by we the people. We the people. We get to decide. All the things that we complain about, we have a say in.
Yeah,
so
no, you're totally right.
Either we're going to let our voices be heard, and or we're not. And if we get into into the next session and we see that same 95% reelection rate in Congress and Senate, then apparently we're not talking loud enough, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I strongly encourage people to at least be registered to vote. I encourage everyone to use their inherent right to vote. And like I said, when it comes to the mainstream media, like even the local media, in Bend got the story wrong Saturday because they weren't there. There has been cases where, I have friends in Portland and they have said, and they have video of major news channels showing up to the Portland rallies that night, there for 5 minutes, talk to 3 people, and then leave before anything happens. When I was there Saturday, there was me and about maybe 2 other journalists. And then, that local news channel 21 showed up and didn't really report. And then it just kind of left. So they weren't there. I was there 6 hours. They don't know the whole story. So then they report wrong. Talk to independent journalists, look at our stuff. I reported right and I offered them, I'm like, I went up to that news channel and I said, hey, you weren't there. I got the whole thing on video. Would there be any chance that you'd be interested? Because I do charge for my work. I think my work is worth stuff. And they're like, oh, we don't charge, but you can send us to it anyway. And I'm like, I'm not going to, give you my hard-earned stuff that could have gotten me hurt for nothing. And so then they just report wrong. And even local news does that. So again, I strongly suggest, I'll go ahead and give Patrick some names, but follow independent journalists. We are there for hours. We are there the whole time. We live stream, we take photos, we do this. Follow us because we are there the whole time. And unlike most people, we don't always have those clickbait things. We're just there to, at least I am, I'm just there to do what's right.
Where we get our information and how we get our information is, and I'm kind of scanning the comments as they come through, and we've got people talking about not voting party lines, and here's let's vote some independents in, let's change the system a little bit, let's change the balance of power, let's vote some people outside of the Republicans and Democratic Party. John Lee, oh geez, I love you, bro.
Is he ever gonna hire me to do his campaign?
I think he's still gonna hire you to do the campaign. I think that's a big deal for him. Crystal's talking about term limits. We could end all of their terms this election cycle right now. Every single elected official in Congress right now, we could change on November 3rd. Every single one. We could end all their terms right now if we just all went out and voted for the other guy. All went out and voted for an independent. You see why we don't need term limits to tell them. We are the term, like John just said, we are the term limits. I think John and I might have had that conversation before. We have that ability at any moment, at any election cycle, to remove any politician in office. So why in the world do we need a term limit bill if we would just go out and vote it? Get rid of them.
There is 26 days till November 3rd.
26
days. By the
way,
Oregon's registration deadline is the 13th. Have you, anyone here listening, have you checked your registration? Do you know that you're registered? Do you know how to register? If anyone needs advice, please contact me. You can contact me on my Twitter at Top Quality Dumpster Fire. Shoot me a text. Do you know how to vote? How are you going to vote by mail? COVID's an issue. How do you do this?
Well, I don't know what I think in Idaho they're doing. They're going to have the ballot stations open the voting stations open where you can still vote in public. At least they go back and forth on it.
Oregon's mail-in only.
Oregon's mail-in only.
Mail-in only.
Yeah, it's a weird year for that, guys. So if we got 20-something days left, if you need to figure it out, now's the time to get on it if you want your voice heard in this election cycle. Like I said, like I was just saying, we have a voice. We just have to choose to use it. And You know, if you're sick and tired of where we're at, then don't do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. If you've been voting Democrat your whole life and it hasn't gotten, you know, and you're sick and tired of where it's at, vote differently. If you've been voting Republican your whole life and you're sick and tired of where it's at, vote differently. You know, here's an idea. How about we all just get a bunch of independents in there and really piss everybody off? You know, like there's nothing more hated in the political spectrum than a moderate. Something I figured out just the other day. It's those of us in the middle that they really dislike because ultimately we decide either way. So why don't we just start electing moderates? I don't know, just kind of a random thought. I don't know. This is hard for me because I look at this. I look at this video that you caught, and I see all this stuff, and we look at protest after protest across this country, and obviously this country wants change, but at the same time, we keep doing the same shit over and over again, and at some point, we have to look at ourselves. We're the ones allowing this. We are. You know,
It's actually
like we the people have been voting this in for generations now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
we got about 10 minutes left. Let's go through some of the pictures that you took of the show or of the event last weekend, and I'd like you to go ahead and let people know as we're getting closer to the election. I just got to say, as we get closer to the election, everybody expect more voting rants from me. It's probably just going to come out. I can't help it because it's what I'm thinking about. So
and as we get closer to the election, follow me. I'm probably going to be in Portland for the election for a few days. So
that's going to be awesome. So what's this picture? Give us the backstory on him.
Yeah, so the series I did for this, I called it Before the Storm, During the Storm, and After the Storm. So I took photos of the BLM rally when everything was fine and peaceful, and pictures of the Trump rally when things were fine and peaceful. Both of these shots are from the BLM rally. That guy, so he was a character. He was on the Trump supporter side. And as you see, he's on his dirt bike, and he ended up driving around with a giant Trump mask, but also ended up wiping out. And he's showing off his wound right there. And he got hurt, but he had a good spirit. Those are the children I ended up interviewing because they started choking on some of the gas. So that was a picture I took earlier in that day. They were on the Trump supporter side, but those kids ended up getting hurt because of what happened. That's another one of the Black Lives Matter. I decided to take some profiles as well. She was really cool. Definitely so sweet when I was talking to her. She's one of the main organizers, I believe. I'm forgetting her name right now, but I also tried to get some very humanizing photos of both sides. She was there, and I want to get some profiles of who is actually showing up. You know, these are people, these are humans. He was on the right side. He showed up with his bike. Apparently someone earlier had come up to him and just taken his picture. That was permission. I actually talked to him for a good while and then ended up, hey, can I take your picture? And he was more than happy to be in my shoot. So she, obviously with the hat, is on the right side. Like I said, there was multiple children. I ended up talking to her parents and to her, and she was just, you could tell that she was happy to be with her mom and dad. So those are some kids on the left side, holding up that sign, why do guns have more rights than my uterus, register to vote. And they ended up doing some pretty cool skateboarding tricks. They were on the left, and they had me take some photos of them doing some skateboard stuff, and they were super happy to be there, and they were really sweet. So this photo, I was really excited to get this one. It was actually the dad and the daughter playing on some rocks. And I saw this opportunity, and I ran up to him as fast as I could. And I was like, hey, can I take your picture? And what I love about it is it's kind of that father-daughter love where I'm sure she doesn't know what her shirt means. She's pretty young, but she's excited to be with dad. And that was a really touching picture. Someone brought their dog, Black Lives Matter. That dog was awesome. I ended up bringing it water. Yeah, I got his profile. There was actually an argument going on during that picture, and I just was able to quickly get in and get that photo. So that's when he wiped out. So you saw his picture earlier. He wiped out, got back on, and I'm afraid some people on the left ended up getting in his face and laughing at him when he was clearly hurt. And that really upset me. And both sides, I do have to play, both sides were guilty that day. And there's one of the quick shots I got when I was also filming of the fight. Yeah, that was a hard fight. You saw that in the video, but that's one of the peacekeepers. You can tell by his shirt, and you can tell that he got it in his eyes pretty bad. She really got it. That was a hard photo for me to take morally, because you know they're in so much pain, but you need to get that picture. And she ended up getting her eyes washed out right during that. You can't really see it from right here, but if you check on my Twitter, you can actually see that she's crying. Yeah, there you go. You see that tear, and that's right after the gun was pulled. And we realized what could have happened if there were shots fired, and that really hit her, especially. Yeah, that was hard, without a doubt.
You know, we talk a lot about humanizing everybody, about recognizing that we are all people. And it's one of the things that no matter your politics, no matter what side you associate with, we have to continue to realize that the other side that we call, they're just people like the rest of us, right? We're all in this together. You know, this idea that we have a shared destiny is absolutely, like, it's not an idea, it's just a fact. Like, we have a shared destiny. Like, it's the truth. America is one country. Where we go, we all go. I mean, that's just the way it works. Like, that's the way it works. You can't have half of us in one place and the other half of us in another, right? So we got to stop. We got to stop looking at the people that disagree with us as our enemies. We got to stop looking at the people that show up on the other side of some rally as your enemy. They're not. And we got to start speaking up. We got to start letting our voices be heard. You know, we have got to start recognizing that we do have all the control if we choose to use it. You know, we have been like negligent in our duty as citizens to police our politicians, and we've allowed it to go on for too long. For years, I have listened to people talk about how we got to get rid of career politicians, or we got to do this, or we need to get people in there that aren't politicians. Well, we did that. We got one person in there who wasn't a politician to start with, and now look. So, like, the system is designed to be changed and to grow with us if we engage with it. But that's what we have to do, everybody. We have to engage with it. We can no longer just sit back and say, yeah, it'll work itself out. It's not going to work. Bethany, we're just about to hit the 1 hour mark. Any final thoughts for today?
Yeah. You know, it's kind of cliche to say, but knowledge is power. Know who you're voting for. Read the books they send you. You know, your voter's pamphlet. Please know who you're voting for. Who is your sheriff? Who is your governor? Who is your DA? Who is the people that are supposed to be public servants? Who are the people that you elect, or that you elected because you chose not to vote, or you chose not to look into? Please follow independent journalists like myself. I'll just go ahead and plug me. Like I said, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Top Quality Dumpster Fire. My Venmo is Pity Boot Playa. I'm sure Patrick will put that up. I'm gonna need some new gear, so if you guys can help out, that will be great. Follow the people who are there. Follow the media who is there. Trust, I've been on here 3 times. Trust that I'm doing the best work. Trust that other journalists like me, and I'll go ahead and send their names to Patrick, that they're doing good work. Trust the people who are there for hours, who get gassed, who get shot at, who run towards guns, who get hurt, who get assaulted every time they're out there. Trust those people. Trust that media. Stop following mainstream, follow independent journalists, and know who you're voting for.
Very well said, Bethany. That was a very shameless plug. Way to go. So, you guys, first of all, Bethany, I want to thank you again. You're always willing to jump on and do a show. And, for those of you that don't know, Bethany lets me know what's going on in her world on a pretty regular basis now. And anytime we get an opportunity to do a show with her or to cover something that we didn't see anywhere else, then we're gonna jump on those opportunities, because I think it's important. And I'm like Bethany. I think it's important to follow independent journalists. I think it's important to find as many sources of information as you can. But again, I'm going to go back to a point about the media. If you're tired of the mainstream media, if you think the mainstream media is deliberately trying to divide us as a country, then stop watching it. Period. Stop watching it. Kill them in the ratings, guys. Kill them in the ratings. That is, look, it is all about their ratings. If we kill them in the ratings, guess what? They'll change their strategy. They'll come out with something new. If they just stop, but here's the thing, their ratings are through the roof right now. People are watching in record numbers right now. And yet people are complaining about the media all the time. So is it possible that you're complaining about the other station that you don't watch while continuing to watch your station, and they're complaining about the other stations that they don't watch while they're watching their station, and we're both getting manipulated? Is it possible that they don't actually have our best interest in mind? Is it possible that they care more about their numbers than they do about the American people? They create chaos constantly. And we see it in the reporting. Anybody who pays attention at all and looks at both sides and tries to see it, it doesn't take long, you guys. It's really simple. It's really easy. So please stop watching the media. Election day is coming. It is time for us again to vote. If you have ever in your life said, I'm sick and tired of career politicians, then don't vote for a career politician. Go vote for an independent. Go vote for somebody new. Get somebody new in there, right? Like, make sure you're ready to vote. Make sure you're ready to get your voice heard. That's it, you guys. Bethany, thank you. Thank you for being on here tonight with me. I appreciate it. And as always, please stay safe out there. Please watch your back. And if you need anything, we're here for you. With that being said, you guys, I love you. Have an amazing night. And please be a little better tomorrow than you were today. And we'll see you guys tomorrow morning.